How's it, guys? And welcome back to the Diverge Podcast. This episode, we're looking back at the 2025 Cape Epic, how the race was won by Scott SRAM and Toyota Specialized, and then having a little look back at the Groot Swem, the Robben Island crossing that I did on Monday. 7.5 kilometers from Robben Island to Big Bay. Still very much feeling the effects of that, but such a cool experience. Can really, really highly recommend giving it a bash. So the Absa Cape Epic this year was a race of extremes, extreme temperatures, extreme heat, and then extreme wetness towards the end of the race. But I think we got lucky really with the rain, that it didn't rain as much on Saturday and Sunday as it did on Monday and Tuesday in Stellenbosch and Somerset West. So that would have been truly a monumental stuff up if it did. I don't know if they would have been able to even host stages in Lawrenceford with that kind of rain. It definitely wouldn't have been enjoyable riding, and would have turned even Jeep tracks into mud baths and made any kind of incline unrideable, especially uphill. So I think at least got a little bit lucky there in hindsight with the weather. Of course, the extreme heat on Wednesday, and then the announcement that a rider did pass away after the event, after being hospitalized during the event, it's hell of a sad news. You have to think that that a better duty of care needs to be exercised towards the riders. Everybody is taking part at their own risk and have to assume responsibility of some sort, responsibility for themselves. But it's a well-established fact that riders, that participants in the Epic push themselves too far, often have to be pulled from the course by medics, by doctors, to be told that they're not allowed starting the next day. I have friends that have started days where they've been told they're not allowed to ride. I have a friend that's been hospitalized and put through 2 or 3 drips, and then was upset with the doctor for not letting her ride the next day. So that mentality of pushing yourself to the very limit or beyond the very limit to reclaim the sunk costs, and the sunk costs are significant. It's time, and it's time away from family, time away from work. It's sacrifices in terms of lifestyle, not going out, not doing the other things that you enjoy, just focusing on training and preparation. And then of course it's the financial commitments that it takes to get to the start line of the Epic. Looking at 60,000 rand per person just for the entry, and then on top, everything else on top of that. Conservatively, saw one person on Bike Hub saying 100,000 rand, but that's unrealistic. I think realistically, you're probably looking at least 150,000 rand to 200,000 rand a person. So you can understand why people really want to finish and are not making logical and rational decisions. And so for me, I think the race organization needs to step in and unfortunately make those decisions for riders, which then brings with it its own problems, because now you're telling somebody that they can't carry on because they are a risk to themselves, and you are denying them their ability to finish, or the potential to finish, and the ability to make decisions for themselves, effectively treating them like children. They're acting like children though, so that's since it's a difficult one. So there's no clear answer to it. I think an independent safety officer position, that the safety officer makes the decision on behalf of the race and the riders, is probably the best way to go about it. But then you need some kind of mitigation, where in that instance, kind of like what happened on Wednesday really, that the riders who are disallowed from carrying on because conditions have become too extreme, and too extreme could be too wet, too cold, or too hot, and then that they are then allowed to ride the next day again, because for most of these people that are putting themselves in that position, they went nowhere near a category podium or winning an age category or anything like that. It's not the competitive riders that are at risk. It's the people towards the back end, the bottom half of the field, which, when there's 1,500 people in the field, 750 people, that's a lot of people. Conservatively, it's a lot of people that are then at risk. And yeah, you got to make those decisions for them, but still then have them in a position where they can continue on and still get their money's worth, because at the end of the day, it is something that they've paid to do, sacrificed to do. And even if you think that they're soft and they haven't trained enough and they don't have the technical skills and all these things, like there is currently no criteria other than buying an entry. Buy the ticket, take the ride. So unless that changes, but I don't really see realistically how that does change. Are you gonna, the other thing is then, are you gonna make people submit extensive medical clearance, doctor's notes from a physical? It all becomes very, very complicated. But yeah, it seems like something will have to change on that front, because especially with Paarl being a venue that the Drakensberg municipality has put a lot of money into, that Fairview Wine and Cheese and the Spice Route have put a lot of money, and the race has put a lot of effort into establishing that race village. It's a venue that they're going to go back to, and they're gonna go back to multiple times over the next 5 to 10 years. So you're going to have the exact same situation again, because if you're going to spend multiple days on the Paarl Mountain in March, you are going to have days where it reaches 40 odd degrees Celsius. You can get lucky one day if you just ride through the mountain. Yeah, if you cut across and ride over the mountain on one day, it might rain in the middle of March, as we've seen multiple times. But if you are going to spend days there, 2-3 nights there, 2-3 stages there, you are going to have days where it gets really, really hot, and where there's no air moving, and there's just no shade on the mountain, and the granite rocks in the Paarl Dome absorb so much heat. Darren Herbst from Paarl Trails was telling us during trail ride that it's often 5 degrees hotter on the mountain than it is down in Paarl town itself. So if it's like it was that day, 41, 42 in town, can very easily be 46, 47. I mean, some people's garments, but that, I don't really believe the garment data, because I know how the garments bake in the sun and absorb heat while they're baking in the sun. So, when a garment says 51 degrees, it is hell of a hot, and that is like a scary number to see. But I don't really think it was 51. But it doesn't really matter how hot it was. It was dangerously hot. So, yeah, that is the sad state of it, the sad reality of this year's race in Paarl, and you have to think that things will be done differently in the future to avoid a similar situation in 2 years or 3 years' time, when the event goes back to the Paarl Mountain. But then on to happier things. Well, happier for Scott SRAM in particular, how the race was won. This year's course was very much I think we sort of moved away from that time when we were talking about the cross-country riders versus the marathon riders, because the accumulated fatigue of the Cape Epic now is at such a nature that it's not, you can't just come with cross-country conditioning and win a stage or win two stages target the prologue and something that's a lot of single track and shorter stages, because you're racing for 4 hours plus every single day, pretty much. And then even at the end of the week, if you've taken a little bit easy, you've still done 5 4 hour days, and then you're going to think that you are going to be able to just smash it quickly on stage 6. It doesn't really work like that. I think everybody that comes now is conditioned for it, is conditioned for the racing, and conditioned to race every single day, unless something goes wrong early on. And then you've kind of seen with teams like Outride, Toyota Songo, and Oberlet Speed Company that had to take it a little bit easier, or one partner at least had to take it a little bit easier, in order to recover and then try to challenge for stage victories. So the Scott SRAM Wilier-Vittoria battle was a fascinating one, and one that really started right on the prologue when Luca Braidot and Simone Avondetto won the prologue by just 20 seconds over Nino, Schurter, and Filippo Colombo. The next day, Wilier-Vittoria put Scott SRAM under pressure on the final climb coming out of Bloemendal, and it looked like Nino was going to crack, was on the back foot, but he managed to hang in over the top. Came back to the men in yellow on the descent, and then he saw that they were suffering, and Filippo counterpunched. Nino went with, and they won the stage by 31 seconds. It was that day. Took yellow by 11 seconds, and then from there onwards, it was a tough old battle between those two teams. The time trial the next day, Nino and Filippo took a bit more time, went out to 45 seconds, and then lost out in 2 sprint finishes because of the way they round the results at the Cape Epic. Even though in a road race they would have been awarded the same time, Scott was rounded down and lost a second on each of those days. So stage 4 and stage 5, stage 3 and stage 4, they lost a second each. Went down to 43 seconds. I'm not exactly sure. On the Queen stage 5, after a good couple of days for Imbuko ChemChamps, Marco Hubert and Tristan Norkier, Tristan and Marco went on a longer distance raid coming out of Stellenbosch. Looked like they might be able to hold on going up the neck, but eventually Marco popped there, and Scott SRAM and Wilier-Vittoria came past them on the neck. Again, Luca Braidot started to struggle towards the top of the neck. Filippo Colombo attacked, took Nino with him, and they managed to put a minute 10 in there. And then going into the weekend on stage 6, you kind of felt that the race was pretty much won, because Filippo was so strong, was clearly the strongest rider in the race, or the strongest rider with a good teammate in the race, because we'll never know how strong Lucas Baum and Matt Beers in particular were, because they were clearly very, very strong. Lucas in particular showed it a few times riding like an angry German, but Matt never really got the chance to show the preparation he'd done, other than just like seeing how lean he was at the race, and also how frustrated he was that things not quite going to plan. How he kept that under wraps, because Matt isn't the most patient of people, is quite impressive. Then going into stage 6, Scott SRAM had 1 minute 50 odd lead, and then we're not really sure what happened, if Filippo dropped his gels, if his gels weren't put into a hydration pack. He picked up a hydration pack at a water point, and then we saw him on the live footage looking in his back pockets, looking in the hydration pack pockets for gels, for food, for nutrition, and there was none. There was also saw a spot where Nino and Filippo dropped back, and Nino handed him something, handed him some food, but still hunger flattered. And the last 25 k's, the last hour of racing on stage 6 was hell for leather for the Italians as they try to make up time. They sort of distanced Scott SRAM. Scott SRAM came back and then distanced them again, and then went absolutely all in. Marco and Tristan said just how hard they were riding in the rain, on very slippery trails. It was over the limit, and very, very stressful for everybody. But Nino and Filippo managed to limit their losses very well indeed, and at the end of the day still went in with a bit of a buffer. I think it was down to 32 seconds, so they lost a minute 20, went in with 32 seconds into the final stage. But then on the other side, the other great thing that happened that day was Imbuko ChemChamp finally won the stage that they'd been looking for all week. Really, it was so cool to see how emotional and excited and happy Tristan and Marco were. They'd gone for it on stage 3, on stage 4, on stage 5, and eventually on stage 6 to get that victory. I mean, they needed luck to go their way a little bit. When Simone dropped his chain in the last kilometre or so, and they managed to ride into victory, because it was clear that they weren't going to be able to outsprint anybody for a stage win, unfortunately, after missing out twice in bunch sprints. But yeah, a real great reward for them, and to see them in red for most of the week after they claimed red on stage 1 in the Absa African jerseys was great as well. But to also see them finish on the podium, the first South African team to finish on the podium since Kevin Evans and David George in 2012. So yeah, 13 years ago. It's a hell of a long time. So long that that both of those have been banned and allowed back to the Cape Epic, which says a lot for how the sport's changed in the last decade and a bit. Going into the last day, again, wet and muddy, and it looked like the race was going to still go over the neck and down what was the climb of stage 5, down to Dornier, which was stressing a lot of people out, including the motorbikers who had to ride. Media guys over there were not happy about that prospect. Eventually, the decision was made to shorten the stage, to reroute the stage, to shorten it and to delay it. Ended up starting at 10:30, and the sun sort of came out a little bit, or in patches came out at least. And again, it was another exciting day. The Wilier-Vittoria guys went on the attack, weren't able to, again, kind of like stage 1, went on the attack, got a little bit of a gap. Nino and Filippo dug deep, time trialed for a bit, managed to bridge across on a climb, and then on a descent, and then the next time there was a little bit of terrain which suited them. They attacked, and Luca and Simone popped there a little bit. Speed Company Racing were with the Italians at that stage, and they waited and then eventually attacked on the next climb as well, bridged across to Scott SRAM, and with the overall pretty much won if they could ride it in safely. Kind of looked like Nino and Filippo made the decision not to go with Georg Geiger and Lucas Baum. And the Speed Company guys got the victory that they needed. It's now their third stage win on the final stage of an Absa Cape Epic. They've ridden 4 epics. They've finished 3 as a team, and on all 3 occasions they've won the final stage. So that's a very cool feature for them. Very cool crinkle in the race history for them. And Nino and Filippo crossed the line second, wrapping up the overall Luca Braidot and Simone Avondetto finished third or fourth on the day, and they finished. They then finished second overall. I think the final gap was 1 minute 30, which is the closest it's ever been in a Cape Epic in the history of the Epic. Tristan Roque and Marco Hubert had a tough old final day, but they finished third overall in the end and won the Absa African jerseys. There was a little bit of drama there with Kimatize Obeya, their two teams, riders from the second team pushing the first team. And it doesn't really seem clear why they were doing it, because the gap between them and fourth and Marco and Tristan in third was pretty big, and they weren't going to make up. There was a little bit less than 10 minutes, but they weren't going to make that up. Yeah, and then they got an hour time penalty, dropped both those two teams, both the Kimatize or Bear teams, out of the top 10, or one out of the top 10, and the other one I think was just outside anyway. But still, that's a lot of prize money, a lot of UCI points thrown away on the last day for no real gain. They finished third or fourth on the stage. So yeah, it was an interesting choice there by the Spanish squad. In the women's race, I think everybody was pretty fearful right from the beginning that Annika Langvad and Sofia Gomez Villafane were going to dominate, and it didn't really play out like that, but I needed some misfortune for Langvad to allow the race to stay tighter. She crashed twice on stage 3, which is also when Samara Shepherd crashed out and bruised ribs pretty badly. That allowed Vera Laza and Alexis Sakada to put them under pressure, especially in the single track downhills. But despite that, every time the roads opened up and there was some jeep track or dual track climbing, Annika was able to just climb faster than her rivals. And with Sofia's help, they managed to stay ahead. They ended up winning 6 stages in total. Their advantage going into stage 6 was 22 minutes on stage 6. Cannondale ISB Sport won the stage, but they'd lost a lot of time earlier on in the race, and so it wasn't really a problem for Toyota Specialized that Tessa Kordikas and Monica Calderon who won that stage. The next day, going into the final day, the position that looked most likely to change was third place, where Titan Racing, Safari, Essence, Honeycombs, Bianca Hoare and Haley Preen were under a lot of pressure from Tessa Kordikas and Monica Calderon. They'd gained, their gap was far, it was 13 minutes before stage 6. It was just over 5 minutes going into stage 7, and if they went over the neck and over Helderberg in the original format of stage 7, you've got to think there was no ways, unfortunately, that Bianca Hoare was going to be able to hang in there. As it was, the rerouted, shortened 41 kilometer stage 7 still gave them enough issues. They still lost 3 minutes on the day. Haley had to push Bianca up every single climb, basically. Lost 3 and a bit minutes, hung on by 2 minutes 20 or something like that to third. Also won the Absa African jerseys, which is very cool. And the team was a last minute team. Bianca was meant to ride with Danelle Stradom, who's been ill, hasn't been able to train to her usual level. So that sort of emergency mix of Haley and Bianca really came good, really did superbly well. And it's going to be interesting to see if that's not maybe a stage race partnership that blossoms a bit more over the rest of the year. I know there is talk about them riding Sani to Sea together as well. Of course, Bianca's folks race, so we will see what happens there. But I think it's great to see Bianca back at the top end of the sport and racing so well after 5-6 years away, and it really has proven to be one of the most talented women in the South African mountain biking field, and it's going to be good to see her racing more at that level. And yeah, I think maybe second place would be a good goal for next year, or maybe even first, depending on who comes to the Epic next year. So there's some good positives for the South Africans to take out of that. Sofia was as spicy as always in her interviews, really made for for good TV. With her battles with Alexis Sakata, who doesn't really give anything back. It doesn't engage back too much. So it's a little bizarre, but it is very funny. And then we'll see what happens, how this year's battles line up for next year. It sort of seems that Vera and Alexis have made a good partnership, so they will hopefully be back. And then it remains to be seen if Annika Langvad, after winning her 6th title, will prioritize coming back to the Absa Cape Epic again. If she feels like she's done everything that she needs to do there, or if she still wants to win more races. I don't know how much. I doubt whether she got much joy out of it, but that might have been down to the injuries rather than anything else. But obviously, having had a baby, having proved to the world that she can still do it, that she can still win, is there anything left to prove? I think it's something that only time will tell, and only Annika will know, and maybe she doesn't know herself just yet either. So that's going to be something to look out for in the coming months, and depends, I suppose, as well how the North American gravel racing goes, and how much she enjoys that return to regular competitive racing. So yeah, lots of things to look forward to that will come out of this year's Cape Epic. And then the Groot Swem, the 7.5 kilometer crossing from Robben Island to Big Bay. Sure, it's difficult to reflect upon, really. It's something that I tried to do in 2022 and failed. Got out of the water after about 3.5 k's, feeling very, 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 very seasick. It's the only time I've had a fever in the last 10 years, probably, was the night after, or that evening after attempting the swim. So I was clearly sick before. But I did manage to learn a little bit from that first experience, going down to Granger Bay, meeting the boats, getting on the boats, taking the trip across to the island. All of that is like, it really builds at your nerves the first time you do it. And while you're trying to stay calm, it's kind of like doing the walk from the Blowkrans bungee, when they strap you up before you go down the path. They put the harness on you and everything, and then you walk down that path, and you walk in underneath the bridge along that terrible grate, and you just get that like feeling, that nervous feeling in the pit of your stomach, which sort of like builds and builds and builds until you get in underneath the bridge, and then you're standing around underneath the bridge waiting for your time to jump. And the time I bungee jumped, I was the second one off the bridge, and so I didn't have that much time to process, and I was very nervous. And I think the later it went, the more successful jumps were, the better it was for everybody. So Dave LaRue, who I was with, who jumped 6th or 7th, by the time he jumped, he was not nervous at all, because everybody else or so many people had gone, and you start feeding off that positive energy that's coming back. And that's kind of how it is with the Robben Island swim. When you're on that boat, and you're on the boat with people that haven't done it before, haven't done successful ones before, and there's a lot of nervous energy there, and everybody's like filled with trepidation. and then you want to just get going, but you can't because it's like a half an hour drive to the island, or half an hour drive, I suppose, to the island. And you get there into the lee of the island, and then you suit up. I swam in a wetsuit. Of course, there were a few people in our group that swam skins. The water was pretty warm, was 16 degrees, which is about as warm as it gets in Table Bay, really. So perfect conditions for a skins swim. But the boat just sort of like parks up in the lee of the island and bobs, and you get your wetsuit on, and you put your swim cap on and your goggles and last bit of sun cream or last bit of Vaseline, or I put squirt barrier balm around my neck, even though I still ended up chafing. I think the chafing is inevitable. And then in you jump, and you got to swim to shore through the kelp. It's about 150 meters or so that you swim to shore, and you get out onto the rocks in waist deep water, standing on the red bait, and wait for everybody to get there and get ready, and then a whistle goes and off you go, and you start swimming, and you swim out through the kelp, which is, it's not the thickest kelp bed in the world, but it is a little bit of like swim scramble through the kelp. You can't really get into a rhythm, and then once you get back out to the boats, you've done that first like 150 meters, you've got to find your boat, find the people that you're swimming with, your swim buddies, because the boat feeds you every half an hour. Once you've got your boat, then you go and you just start swimming, and you keep on swimming. And in my case, you swim for 2 hours and 27 minutes. And yeah, the first half an hour goes pretty slowly, and then your support boat stops, and the skipper or the supporter on the boat will hand you your bottles. Most people drink a warm tea mix, a honeyed tea mix. I had rooibos tea and honey, and then a Biogen cytogen mix, and I had an empty bottle and then a bottle of Biogen cytogen, the race fuel, and then my Stanley flask with hot tea in it. So then pour sort of 150 mils of hot tea into the empty bottle, about 100 mils of cytogen into the empty bottle, give that a bit of a shake, and then throw it down to you. The suggestion is to drink about 200 mils every half an hour. You really don't feel like drinking because you're in the water, but because you're in the water, you don't need electrolytes because you're absorbing so much salt. But also because you're absorbing so much salt, you need to pee quite a lot as well. So you do need to put back those fluids, even though you don't feel like it. Putting back the fluids is pretty important, and the warmth of that hot tea is really quite nice. The honey and cytogen mix was way too sweet for me. It's like cloyingly sweet, but again, you kind of need that energy and that readily available energy. The woman, one of the people that I ended up swimming with, Jana, she had a gel at two of the stops. I don't know if it was a planned thing. I never actually spoke to her about that, but maybe it was just like she felt like she needed it. I had a gel in my box as an emergency thing, but I didn't need it. I found the honey in the tea and the cytogen more than enough to fuel me. And yeah, first half an hour was felt like it took very long. Second half an hour, I swam less far. I think like the first half an hour I did 1,800 meters. The second one I did like 1,500. But then after that, it sort of, even though my distances were kind of in that 1,500 1,700 range for each half an hour, it felt like the time went quicker. I don't know. And you're trying to think about things, but you're not really thinking about things. It's difficult to focus on anything else. And I think like when I was swimming my best, I was actually just focusing on my strokes, counting strokes to breaths, for something to do. And then the other thing is that the water is like a pea green color. So if you stretch down as deep as you can with your hands on a pull, your fingertips kind of disappear into the pea green murk below you, and there's nothing to see. All you see occasionally is a jellyfish coming past. There were no seals, fortunately, given the rabies situation in Table Bay that we saw during the swim. No dolphins. We saw a dolphin and a seal on the way out to Robben Island, but nothing during the swim. And no fish, no anything. People always ask about sharks, but you feel quite safe because of the boats right next to you and all the swimmers around you. And weirdly, I've swam without boats. I've swam a fair bit in the sea before doing torpedo swim runs. I've never worried about it during torpedo swim runs, even when I've ended up kind of on my own in a stretch of water where the next closest person is like 50 meters away. I haven't worried about that because there's been lots of people in the water. When I've swam with mates in Fishhook and in Betty's Bay, I have thought about it, but those times have been like swimming right behind the back line, in clearer water. And I almost feel like clearer water, just because you can see further, gives you like more ability to think about these things, or more opportunity to think about these things, because you see other things moving, and you sort of will see the sand being like kicked up by a wave as it breaks or as it rolls past, which when you're swimming across Table Bay, there's just nothing, so you don't think about it. And eventually, after 2 hours, the last feed, we were just over a kilometre, like 1.1, 1.2 k's off the beach at Big Bay, and the skipper just said, okay, it's going to be the next 200, 300 meters is going to be tough towards Fullsteen, because there's a lot of refraction coming off the rocks, but after that it'll get easier. And he said, pull hard for the next 200-300 meters, and then it'll be easy. It never got easy. I don't know if the tide was going out or what was happening, but it just felt like swimming against the current the whole way. And there was a fair bit of northwesterly wind swell, but no real primary ground swell from the southwest. So getting into the bay, I just kept waiting for a wave to like push me in, and it never did. And eventually, in like less than waist deep water, a little foamy broke behind me, picked me up, tumbled me onto the sand, and when I tried to get up, I cramped very badly in my calf, and then hobbled to shore, trying to stretch out the cramp. And before I could stop cramping properly, the woman from Big Bay Events took a photo of me that I could like barely get my hands off my hips to stand up straight for the photo, and that was that. It was done. And yeah, hot chocolate afterwards, which was fantastic. Yeah, even though it wasn't really cold, and then even the skin swimmers, no one was whisked off the beach and helped out for hypothermia. Everybody was pretty warm afterwards. Once again, very lucky with the sea conditions or the sea temperature, and the wind did sort of start to pick up through the afternoon or through the morning. And by the time we left the beach after brunch, at like 12 o'clock, it was properly blowing. So yeah, again, could have been a lot worse with the weather, and that little bit of wind swell and side chop wasn't actually that bad, and could have been a whole lot worse upon reflection. But yeah, it's definitely something that I will do again, and something that I recommend if you enjoy swimming, if you enjoy ocean swimming, if you've done a triathlon or a torpedo swim run or something like that. Yeah, give the Robben Island crossing a bash. It's an interesting challenge. It's definitely more in your mind than it is in your body, because you just kind of got to get into a slow rhythm and just swim, just one hand in front of the other, and just keep swimming. So it's not the most intellectually stimulating of activities, but not as hard on your body as going for a 2.5 hour run. So yeah, give it a go, I reckon. And yeah, that is it for this week's show. Remember, you can read all about the 2025 Absa Cape Epic on diverge.info. And I've got a story app as well about the Groot Swem, about my Robben Island crossing. So you can read that on diverge.info as well. Until next time, thank you very much. Cheers.